Hi, Holly Stokes, the brain trainer here. And do you ever wonder why I know what I need to do, I just can't make myself do it? Do you find yourself blocked from moving forward? Well, in this video, we're going to explore how to stop self-sabotage, understanding your brain at a deeper level, and what methods you can start using to effectively update what your mind is running in the background. Welcome to Stop Self-Sabotage with Your Brain. So if you've noticed giving way to old habits, cravings, impulses, fear, stress, worry, lack of motivation, self-sabotage, well, your brain is actually wired into these patterns. And let's take a closer look at what your mind is running automatically in the background and what you can do about it. So in the previous videos, you probably remember me talking about the neural net. As these neurons link up, it creates a pathway. Then each time we repeat that pathway, whether it's a thought or whether it's an action, that pathway gets strengthened and it increases the impulses along that pathway, becomes stronger, and it becomes strengthened each time we repeat it, until it becomes a default pathway. And there we have a habit. So we have habits in what we do, which can be very useful. We don't have to learn relearning to tie our shoes or drive a car. But we also have habits in what we think and how we feel. And it's these automatic habits of the mind, brain habits, that are running in the background that can make all the difference between whether we follow through or not on the actions we know we should take. So here's another piece of the puzzle, that when we talk about behavior, motivation, focus, following through, we really also need to understand the patterns running in the background that lead up to our motivation. I call this the thought, feeling, action cycle. What we think creates the feelings that we feel, and the feelings that we feel have everything to do with what we follow through, or if we're falling off the wagon. I want you to think about motivation. So a lot of people will tell me, I just need motivation. But what is motivation? Motivation is a feeling, right? So as we look at the thought, feeling, action cycle at a deeper level, this is your key to really paying attention to what's going on internally that then allows you to be aware of whether you're going up an upward spiral or down that downward spiral of the thought, feeling, action cycle. Okay, so now let's talk about sabotage. You probably recognize it as a part of me wants to and a part of me doesn't. And then we find ourselves kind of battling between these two parts of ourselves. And you can have all of the knowledge in the world, but it will count for nothing if you don't actually apply what you know or follow through on what you know. In fact, this reminds me, when I was in my 20s, I really studied nutrition and really understood, our food is the building blocks of our body. It really helps our body heal and repair. You are what you are made of. I totally understood that. But even though I knew all the right foods to eat and the foods to avoid, I still found myself hoarding packages of cookies under the car seat. That's right, so nobody else would get them. And I would polish them off in a couple of days. So what is going on that the mind is holding on to that or having that focus, even though we know we should do something different? Well, there can be some different layers in how the mind operates. And I want to walk you through understanding these layers of the mind. And this is why it seems so complicated, but this is actually how we take charge of what the brain is running and help it learn its way out of those old patterns. So a really useful analogy in talking about how the mind works is to think of an iceberg. And there's an image here of an iceberg. And you can see the top part that's above the surface, that's what we see, that's what we're aware of. Well, that's like our conscious, active planning, goal-setting mind. That's where we make those statements, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to follow through and complete that business project or write that book, right? So we get that at the conscious level. Now I want you to think about where your car keys are. Hopefully you know where those are, or your phone number. And that's information that's easy for us to retrieve because we use it often or recently, and it's stored just below the surface. It's stored in the subconscious mind. And now to think of it even a deeper layer, think about your 5th birthday or your 10th birthday. Well, even though you don't remember your 5th birthday consciously, unless you've had a photograph or your mind has reviewed it, that's still information stored at the deeper layer of the mind. And it affects how we operate on a daily basis. And here's how this works. So in this analogy of the iceberg, the conscious level is at the top, and then down through the deeper layers, these are under the surface. So we're not often aware of our past history because this is how the brain organizes for efficiency, or how the mind kind of stores these events. So what happens is we have an event in the history, and one event over time, our mind kind of stacks our memories on top of each other, one after another, so that the ones that are easiest for us to retrieve or remember are the ones that are more recent. And our past history is stored down below the surface. Now, here's how this can affect our life, even on a daily basis, even without our awareness of what the mind is doing. So if we've had an experience from our past, the brain can make a decision about who we are and how the world works, and then start to run that on automatic. A good example comes from one of my clients, and she had this pervasive feeling, I'm not good enough. And when we looked back, we found in her mind, she had a 4-year-old memory of her running across the lawn, chasing a ball with her brother. Her brother was 6 years old, and as she was chasing the ball, she slipped and missed catching the ball. But her brother, being a little more coordinated and agile, ran after the ball, picked it up, and yelled around the lawn, I won, see, I did better than you did. And in her mind, as a 4-year-old mind that doesn't interpret life as well as we might as an adult, her brain picked up this idea, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't compete. So this is how these old habits and patterns of the brain get stuck on repeat. And think of them just as ideas that got stuck in the background of the mind. Now, unless we update what these files are doing in the brain, the mind will continue to run those old habits and programs, and we'll find ourselves fighting against our brain, fighting against that programming. So here's what the brain includes in how we operate on a daily basis. Our mind includes all of our past experiences, so that's the archives of our mind, all of our memory files. It also includes our cultural environment, so how we were raised in the area and the culture that we grew up in. We can also recognize that our parents' belief systems or generational beliefs are also part of how our mind filters or is wired in our experience. More than any other time in the history of the world, we have abundance and plenty, and there are still belief systems running around from the Great Depression. Now, the other layers that can get stuck in the automatic repeat of the mind are decisions and interpretations. So just like I shared that story of the girl running across the field, tripping, and then picking up that idea, oh, I must not be good enough. Our mind can hold on to these decisions, interpretations, unless we change them. And this is one of the ways that we can help the brain recode that past history, recode those events. Now, there's also judgments and opinions, and this can also get in our way. A good example of this comes from sales people. So I often have sales professionals coming in, and they have these blocks against being a salesperson. And as we look at the meanings that the mind has attached to sales and salespeople, well, there's these decisions or judgments about what it means to be a salesperson. Salespeople are sleazy. Salespeople just want your money. And because of that past history, so you might recognize that from your history as well, that we have these judgments or opinions about certain people or certain events in our life. And then most importantly, we get down to the labels that we've taken on, the definitions of who we are and what's possible. I call them the I ams, or a lot of us recognize them as the I am nots. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not blah, 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 right? So this can be a lot of programming, a lot of automatic patterns that your brain has picked up through the years. So what do we do about this? So how do we update the unconscious, or I call it the automatic mind, and create new patterns quickly? Well, there's several different processes and modalities that I work through. The first one is hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy at the simplest level is helping the mind shift its focus. So if the mind has been focusing on cigarettes or cravings, or even things that cause us stress, we can help it learn to adjust its focus and to run a new pattern in its place. The other that I work with quite a bit is neuro-linguistic programming. Stands for the neurons in our brain, linguistic, our language patterns, and it refers to this programming, what our mind has picked up through the course of our life. And then the third process modality that I work with is thought pattern management. And thought pattern management is actually based off of advanced hypnotherapy and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming skills. And thought pattern management has a little different focus. It looks at, instead of switching the mind one habit at a time, how do we actually automate the mind to make its own changes so that the mind becomes generative in the effect of what you focus on, how you think, how you feel, and how you move forward. So let's take a closer look at each of these. So hypnotherapy, neurolinguistics, and thought pattern management are some of these skill sets that then can speak to the deeper layer of the mind, this old history, these past events, and essentially get the automatic mind to change its focus. We can effectively change habits, patterns, and those programs of the mind, whatever it's running automatically in the background, actually very quickly.